You finally reached $250,000. Maybe it took 10 years, maybe it took 15. Maybe you spent most of that time wondering whether the sacrifices were even worth it. Then the market has one bad month and your account falls from $250,000 to $225,000. $25,000 disappears from the screen. That might be more than you invested during the entire previous year, and that is the part nobody warns you about. The first $250,000 does change everything, but not because you suddenly become rich. You probably cannot retire. You probably cannot stop thinking about bills. You still have to work, plan, and make decisions about what you can afford. What changes is the size of the consequences. Your portfolio is now large enough to move further in a few weeks than your paycheck can move it in an entire year. Small fees are no longer small. A bad investment can erase years of progress. A lifestyle upgrade can destroy the gap that allowed you to build the money in the first place. And one emotional decision can convert a temporary decline into a permanent loss. At $50,000, compounding starts becoming visible. At $250,000, your mistakes start becoming expensive. You are no longer only building wealth, you are now responsible for protecting a financial machine that is finally large enough to change your life. Imagine two investors. The first has $25,000 invested, the second has $250,000 invested. Both experience a 10% market decline. The first person opens the account and sees a loss of $2,500. That is unpleasant. It may represent several months of contributions, but the number is still small enough to process as part of investing. The second person sees a loss of $25,000. The percentage is identical. The emotional experience is not. $25,000 looks like a car. It looks like a down payment. It looks like a year of rent in some cities. It looks like several years of vacations, repairs, and medical bills. The moment the balance falls, the second investor stops thinking in percentages and begins thinking about everything that money could have purchased. That is where the danger begins. Nothing fundamental may have changed about the long-term plan. The investor may still own the same diversified portfolio. The decline may simply be part of normal market volatility, but the dollar amount now feels too large to ignore. The person starts checking the account every morning, then again at lunch, then before going to sleep. Financial news suddenly feels personal. Every negative headline appears to confirm that something worse is coming. The investor begins thinking, I will sell now, wait until things calm down, and buy back when the market feels safe. It sounds responsible. It sounds like protecting the money, but the market rarely sends a message announcing that the danger is past. By the time the news feels positive, prices may already have recovered. The investor avoids part of the decline, but also misses part of the recovery. A temporary loss on a screen becomes a permanent loss created by the investor's own decision. When the account was small, the person worried that progress was too slow. Now the account is large, and the person worries that progress can disappear too quickly. That is the first new rule at $250,000. You must learn to experience larger dollar movements without automatically interpreting them as evidence that the plan has failed. This does not mean every investment should be held forever. A bad company can remain a bad company. A concentrated position can be genuinely dangerous. A portfolio that does not match your time horizon may need to be changed. But a decision made according to a written plan is different from a decision made because a red number created panic. Before your portfolio becomes large, you can believe you have a high tolerance for risk. It is easy to say you would remain calm during a 30% decline when 30% represents $3,000. It is harder when 30% represents $75,000. The real test of your risk tolerance does not happen inside a questionnaire. It happens when the number on the screen is large enough to change your plans, and you still have to decide whether to interfere. The second major change is that financial inefficiency becomes expensive. Suppose you pay an annual investment fee of 1%. With $10,000 invested, that is approximately $100 during the first year. You might not care. With $250,000 invested, 1% is $2,500 during the first year. But the real cost is not limited to $2,500. That money is removed from the portfolio. It no longer has the opportunity to compound for you. Imagine, purely as an illustration, that $250,000 grows at 7% annually for 20 years without any additional contributions. It would become approximately $967,000. Reduce the return from 7% to 6%, and the result falls to approximately $802,000. That 1 percentage point difference produces a gap of roughly $165,000. Real returns will not be smooth, and fees are not the only factor affecting performance, but the example shows why percentages that once looked irrelevant deserve attention after the portfolio becomes substantial. The same issue applies to expensive funds, unnecessary advisory costs, frequent trading, avoidable taxes, and financial products that are too complicated to understand. When the account was small, inefficiency might cost hundreds. At $250,000, it can cost thousands every year and potentially six figures over decades. This does not mean you should obsess over every tiny expense. That can become another form of financial distraction. The point is to recognize which costs multiply with the size of your assets. A $5 banking fee remains $5. A percentage charged against your entire portfolio grows as the portfolio grows. One is an annoyance. The other can quietly redirect a meaningful part of your future wealth to somebody else.
Complexity also becomes more tempting at this stage. For years, you may have built wealth using a simple strategy: regular contributions, diversified investments, low costs, and patience. Then you reach $250,000 and begin feeling that the portfolio is too important for such a simple system. You assume a serious amount of money requires a more serious-looking strategy: more funds, more accounts, more trading, private investments, options, products with impressive names and long presentations. You begin solving problems that did not exist. The portfolio becomes harder to understand, harder to monitor, and easier to damage. More complexity does not automatically create more sophistication. Sometimes it creates more fees, more taxes, more opportunities for mistakes, and more reasons to panic. The strategy that helped you reach $250,000 may not be perfect forever. Your life can change, your goals can change, your time horizon can change, but the portfolio should become more complicated only when your financial situation requires it, not because the balance makes simplicity feel embarrassing. Another risk is concentration. Maybe you reached $250,000 because one investment performed extremely well. Perhaps it was the stock of the company that employs you. Perhaps it was a technology company you bought years ago. Perhaps it was one sector that happened to dominate the market during the period when you were investing. The position now represents half your portfolio. Selling part of it feels wrong because the investment created so much of your success. You know the company. You believe in its future. You may even feel loyal to it. But familiarity is not the same as safety. If your salary, health insurance, career opportunities, and investments all depend on one employer, a single business problem can damage every part of your financial life at the same time. You can lose your job while the stock is falling. You can lose future income and existing wealth during the same event. The investment may have helped you reach $250,000. That does not automatically mean it should control what happens to the next $250,000. Success creates another problem: overconfidence. When a portfolio grows from $100,000 to $250,000, it is natural to conclude that your decisions caused the result. Sometimes they did. You remained consistent. You invested during difficult periods. You avoided spending everything you earned. Those decisions matter. But part of the growth may also have come from being invested during a strong market. One stock may have performed unusually well. One asset class may have experienced a period that will not be repeated. A rising balance does not prove that every choice was intelligent. Sometimes it proves that you participated in a favorable environment. The distinction becomes important because confidence changes behavior. The person who was cautious with $25,000 may become aggressive with $250,000. They begin believing that normal diversified returns are too slow. They want to reach $500,000 quickly, then $1 million. They calculate what would happen if they earned 20% instead of 8%. They see someone online who supposedly multiplied an account in 2 years. They begin concentrating the portfolio, using leverage, or buying investments they cannot clearly explain. This is financially backward. When you had very little capital, an unusually high return would not have changed your life. Doubling $5,000 produces another $5,000. Once you have $250,000, you no longer need a miracle for the account to become substantial. You need enough time and enough discipline not to destroy the base. At a hypothetical 7% annual return, with no additional contributions, $250,000 would grow to approximately $492,000 after 10 years. After 20 years, it would approach $967,000. After 30 years, it would be approximately $1.9 million. Those numbers are illustrations, not promises. Markets do not grow in a straight line, and actual results can be dramatically different. But the principle matters. Once you have a meaningful base, time can do more for you than constant attempts to outsmart a market. The closer you get to wealth, the less you need an extraordinary investment. Yet that is often the exact moment when people begin searching for one. Then comes the most deceptive change of all. You start feeling rich before you are rich. $250,000 is a serious achievement. It may represent thousands of hours of work, years of automatic contributions, raises that you did not fully spend, cars you continued driving after you could technically replace them, vacations you delayed, homes you decided not to buy. Nobody sees those decisions. They only see the account balance after the work has already been done. When you finally reach the number, you may feel that you deserve visible proof of your success, and you probably do deserve to enjoy some of the money you earn. The problem is not enjoyment. The problem is allowing one milestone to permanently change the cost of your life. Imagine someone who reaches $250,000 and buys a $70,000 car. They do not withdraw $70,000 from the portfolio. They make a down payment and finance the rest. The investment account still shows $250,000, so the decision appears affordable. But now there is a large monthly payment, higher insurance, more expensive maintenance, perhaps higher registration and property taxes. The real cost is not only the price of the vehicle, it is the reduction in future investment capacity. Money that previously entered the portfolio now pays for the car. The account may continue growing, but the system feeding it has weakened. The same thing happens with housing. A larger home can create a larger mortgage, higher taxes, higher insurance, greater utility costs, more furniture, and a permanent expectation that future income must support the upgraded lifestyle. From the outside, the person appears wealthier. Inside the financial system, the person becomes more dependent on the next paycheck.
That is the $250,000 trap. The balance is large enough to create the feeling of success, but not necessarily large enough to finance every symbol of success. You can own $250,000 in investments and still be financially fragile if your fixed monthly expenses rise to consume nearly all of your income. The goal is not to avoid every purchase. That would turn wealth building into a punishment. The goal is to understand the difference between spending money and increasing the permanent cost of being yourself. A vacation ends, a recurring car payment returns next month. A celebration dinner does not usually change your financial trajectory. A house that requires 30 years of larger payments can. One-time spending may slow progress. Permanent lifestyle inflation can restructure the entire journey. This is why a useful rule after reaching a large milestone is to avoid making permanent lifestyle decisions based on temporary market gains. Suppose your portfolio rises by $40,000 during a strong year. It is tempting to treat that increase as additional income, but the gain may disappear during the next decline. If you use a temporary increase in your net worth to justify a permanent monthly payment, you combine an unstable asset with a fixed obligation. The market can reverse, the payment does not. Your financial life becomes stronger when fixed expenses are supported by reliable income, not by the assumption that a good market year will repeat forever. This may sound excessively cautious, but $250,000 is not valuable only because of what it can eventually become. It is valuable because of the options it gives you right now. It may not buy complete financial independence, but it can create distance between a problem and a crisis. Imagine your job becomes unbearable. Your manager expects constant unpaid overtime. The company begins cutting employees. You're offered a position in a different industry, but it initially pays less. A person with no financial reserve may understand exactly what should be done and still be unable to do it. The next rent payment controls the decision. The next credit card bill controls the decision. The fear of missing one paycheck controls the decision. The person remains in the wrong job because there is no financial space to move. Now consider someone with a strong cash reserve and $250,000 invested.
The money does not make the decision painless. It does not guarantee the new career will work. It does not mean the person should carelessly resign tomorrow, but it changes the negotiation. The person can reject a terrible offer. They can spend several months searching instead of accepting the first available job. They can complete a certification. They can temporarily earn less while building a better long-term career. The money creates time, and time changes the quality of decisions. The same principle applies when a car breaks down, a roof needs repair, or income is interrupted. Without financial resources, an unexpected expense can become high-interest debt. The original problem may cost $5,000. Financing it badly can turn it into a much larger problem that follows the person for years. With a stronger financial base, the event remains unpleasant, but it does not automatically infect the rest of the financial system. A problem stays a problem. It does not become a crisis. That is what $250,000 actually buys. Not permanent luxury, not unlimited spending, not a guaranteed retirement. It buys resilience. It buys negotiating power. It buys the ability to think beyond next Friday. And interestingly, the portfolio can provide these benefits without being spent. Simply knowing the money exists can change how you communicate at work, how carefully you evaluate opportunities, and how much pressure you feel to accept a bad situation. But this advantage exists only if the portfolio remains protected. If you begin treating long-term investments like a checking account, the negotiating power disappears. If you panic every time the market falls, the resilience disappears. If your expenses rise until you once again require every dollar of your paycheck, the freedom disappears. That is why the rules change after $250,000. Before reaching the number, your primary job is accumulation. Earn money, keep a meaningful portion of it, invest consistently, avoid catastrophic debt, and repeat. After reaching the number, those actions still matter, but they are no longer enough. Now you must protect the portfolio from unnecessary costs, protect it from concentration, protect it from your need to prove that you are successful, protect your future contributions from lifestyle inflation, and protect yourself from believing that a large account makes you invincible. One practical way to do this is to separate the different jobs your money performs. Cash for near-term emergencies should not depend on the stock market being up when you need it. Money required within the next few years should not necessarily carry the same risk as money intended for several decades in the future. Long-term investments should not be sold every time an ordinary expense appears. When every dollar has a defined purpose, market volatility becomes easier to tolerate. You are less likely to panic over a decline when you know next month's bills are not dependent on selling investments. Another useful step is deciding what would cause you to change the portfolio before the decision becomes emotional. What allocation are you trying to maintain? How often will you review it? Under what circumstances will you sell an investment? Which financial headlines will you deliberately ignore? You do not need a 50-page document. A simple written policy can protect you from the version of yourself that appears during a market panic or a speculative boom. During calm periods, nearly everyone believes they will behave rationally. A plan matters because calm judgment is not always available when the numbers become large. You also need to define what the $250,000 represents. Is it retirement money? Is it intended to create flexibility before retirement? Is it part of a future home purchase? Is it meant to fund a business? A number without a purpose is easy to misuse. It can become a car one month, a risky investment the next, and emergency spending after that. Once the money has a specific job, decisions become clearer. You can evaluate a purchase by asking whether it supports or competes with that job.
The most dangerous moment may not be when your account is at zero. At zero, you understand that something must change. You know you need to build. You know the current system is not enough. At $250,000, the danger is less obvious. The account looks strong. The habits appear successful. You begin relaxing the behavior that created the result. You invest less because the portfolio can supposedly grow on its own. You increase spending because you have earned it. You take additional risk because you now consider yourself experienced. Nothing breaks immediately.
That is why the process is dangerous. The account may continue rising for several years. Income may continue covering the new expenses. The concentrated investment may continue performing well. The bad decision remains hidden until the environment changes. Then the market falls, the company cuts jobs, or the expensive lifestyle becomes difficult to support. The financial machine was not destroyed in one dramatic moment. It was weakened through a series of decisions that each appeared reasonable. This is the unexpected truth about the first $250,000. The largest threat may no longer be your inability to save. It may be your reaction to finally having something worth protecting. Your fear during declines, your confidence after strong returns, your desire to display success, your impatience with a strategy that appears boring, your belief that because the account has grown, it will always recover from whatever decision you make. The portfolio is finally powerful enough to change your life, but it is also large enough for one emotional choice to erase years of work. Your job has changed. You are no longer only feeding the machine, you are now responsible for not breaking it. That is what separates this milestone from the first $50,000. At $50,000, you prove that you can create a system. You learn to contribute consistently. You experience the first visible effects of compounding. You build the habits required to move away from zero. At $250,000, you face a different test. Can you remain calm when normal volatility represents tens of thousands of dollars? Can you reject unnecessary complexity? Can you enjoy success without converting every gain into a recurring expense? Can you continue following a reasonable plan after the numbers become large enough to trigger fear and greed? Building wealth and keeping wealth are different skills. The first requires action. The second frequently requires restraint. You must know when to invest, but you must also know when to do nothing. Do nothing when the headline is designed to frighten you. Do nothing when everyone around you is becoming rich from an investment you do not understand. Do nothing when a strong year makes you feel like a financial genius. Do nothing when a temporary decline creates the urge to abandon a long-term plan. Doing nothing is not always correct, but after the system has been designed properly, unnecessary action often creates more damage than inactivity. The first $250,000 changes everything because the consequences become real. The market can now move your net worth more than your salary can. A 1% cost becomes thousands of dollars. One concentrated position can place years of progress at risk. One lifestyle upgrade can eliminate your ability to keep investing. One panicked sale can permanently damage a plan that was still working. But the opposite is also true. A well-protected $250,000 can become the foundation for the next stage of your life. It can grow while you continue contributing. It can give you time to make better career decisions. It can absorb ordinary financial shocks. It can reduce the power that one employer, one bill, or one bad month has over you. The number itself does not guarantee any of that. Your behavior determines whether the money becomes a tool or merely a temporary account balance. So when you reach $250,000, do not ask only how quickly you can turn it into $500,000. Ask a more important question: what could cause me to lose the system that created it? Maybe it is panic. Maybe it is lifestyle inflation. Maybe it is concentration. Maybe it is unnecessary fees. Maybe it is the belief that you have already finished. Identify that risk before it appears, because the first $250,000 is not a finish line. It is the moment when the financial machine becomes large enough to matter and fragile enough to require protection. You are not rich enough to stop paying attention, but you are no longer starting from nothing. You have built something that can give you choices, resilience, and time. The goal is not to look like someone who has $250,000. The goal is to preserve what $250,000 can do for you. Would you rather have $250,000 invested where almost nobody can see it, or spend it creating a lifestyle that makes you look wealthy? Your answer to that question may determine whether the first $250,000 becomes the foundation of real freedom or the most expensive illusion you ever bought. Subscribe if you want to build wealth without pretending that one lucky investment will solve everything. And tell me in the comments, does $250,000 create freedom, or is it still too little to change your life?